Yeah. And we can. So the subject for today is Hefker, and we're going to take a look at the Mishnah on Daf Mem Gimel here in Nedarim. And the Mishnah records a machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi. What's exactly the case? A person is mudar hana bichavero. So let's say Shimon cannot get any hana from Reuven. Is there a way of circumventing this Isser? And the Tanakama says the following, that meniach al hasela o al hagader, that if the madir takes, let's say, food that he wants to feed the mudar, that's Shimon, and he places it on a stone, on a boulder, or on top of a fence, v'omer, and he declares, harei hein mufkarim, l'chol mi sheyachpotz. It's hefker for anyone who wants to come and take it. V'hallah, according to the Tanakama, the mudar, notel v'ochel. He's allowed to take it and eat it. In other words, he's not getting hana from Reuven because Reuven made it hefker for everybody. So there was no direct Maisa being Mahana Shimon. Reuven is not being Mahana Shimon, he's just making it Hefker. Shimon, from his part, is taking the mazon from Hefker. He's not taking it from Reuven. For Rabbi Yossi, Oser. Rabbi Yossi says this is Oser. So we don't know up front what's the reason, what's the logic of Rabbi Yossi. After all, the logic of the Rabbanim seems to be very, very convincing, very persuasive, because it was Hefker, and there's no direct hakna from Reuven the Madir to Shimon Amudar, so the Shimon Amudar is not getting any benefit directly from the Madir. And why does Rabbi Yossi say it's Osir? And here we have machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So we'll start with Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, my time with Rabbi Yossi, kosover Hefker kematana. Ma matana adi asyam rishus nosein l'shus mekabel af Hefker adi asi l'shus hazoche. It means the following, that according to Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation of Rabbi Yossi holds that Hefker is like matana. Just like in the case of matana, Reuven is makna something to Shimon, and it's only when Shimon is zoche and makes a kinyan and acquires ownership, only then does the object leave the reshus and the bailus of Reuven, the makna. So too, according to Rabbi Yossi in Hefker, the object doesn't leave the bailus of Reuven, who is mafkirin, until it enters into Shimon's reshus, which means that Shimon made a kinyan on the object. So while the object is in this middle state, after the Maisa Hefker on the part of Reuven, but before Shimon made a kinyan on it, it's still considered in the reshus of the mafkir, of the original owner. It hasn't yet left his reshus. It only leaves his reshus the moment that the zocha, in this case Shimon, acquires ownership on it. So basically, according to Rabbi Yossi, the way Rabbi Yochanan understands it, the object, in this case the mazon, goes directly from the reshus of the madir of Reuven into the reshus of Shimon, the muda, when Shimon makes the kinyan. Because until Shimon makes the kinyan, the object, the mazon, is still in the reshus of Reuven the bailam, the mafkir. It only leaves the reshus of the mafkir the moment that Shimon is zocha in it. So Shimon really is zocha directly from the madir, from Reuven, and therefore it's awesome. Now we're going to fast forward a little bit to see the alternative shita of Reish Lakish. Give me a second here. So Reish Lakish is here on Daf Mem Daled Omen Aleph. Mem Daled Omen Aleph is a very short daf, and about halfway through the daf, we have Reish Lakish. Now Reish Lakish is going to change the whole perspective, the whole understanding of Rabbi Yossi. and he's going to claim that Rabbi Yossi is working with what we call a Gzeira D'Rabbanan. He's not dealing with a Doraisa. And all this has to do with a case which is quoted here on Daf Mem Daled Amud Beis, a brisa of Meiser. The halacha is that Hefker is potem in a Maser. And the brisa says that Hamafkir is karmo, a person was mafkir his vineyard, ulashachar, and the very next morning, Omad ubitzaro. He went ahead and he harvested his own kerem. So the question now is, would he be chayv maser in this case? Since Hefker is potem from maser, then at one moment in time, this was Hefker, even though he himself, the BIyun, was zochem in a Hefker, but before doing so, before he was mashkim baboker Omad ubitzaro, it was Hefker, therefore he is potem in a maser. And this works out well according to the shita of the Chachamim, because the shita of the Chachamim is that the moment that you mafkir something, it leaves your reshus. We don't have to wait until someone is zocher, and therefore when he himself wakes up the next morning and he cuts down his grapes, he is being zochem in a hefker, and therefore he's potem in a maser. That makes a lot of sense. The question is, what would Rabbi Yossi say in such a case? According to Rabbi Yochanan, who learns that Rabbi Yossi is dealing with the Doraisa halacha, and it's not hefker to leave the reshus of the mafkir until someone else is zocha in it, then basically, when he cuts down his own kerem, he is being chozer bo, he's rejecting his original hefker, which he's allowed to do until someone else is zocha, and therefore it's not hefker. And that's a Doraisa halacha. So Rabbi Yossi would therefore argue in the case of a mafkir's karmel l'shachar omad ubitzaro that he be chayev in maser according to Rabbi Yossi.
Well, why does that make it on Hefker?
Because
Rabbi Yossi is saying that you can have Hefker, but even while it's Hefker, it still is Birshus BIyun.
Correct. So
the
never was
Meiser. No, it's not. Rabbi Yossi is saying that there is no such thing as Hefker. He's just saying that even while the item is Hefker, the original BIyun
Hefker means I'm giving you the ability to be zoch. But if I myself take it, then I never would.
But who said that's not enough for the P'tur Meiser?
Because the Gemara is assuming now that if you yourself decide to keep it for yourself, then it never left your reshus, because it's got to go out of your reshus into someone else's reshus before the Hefker is chal. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, in Rabbi Yossi, you could be chozer bo, you could decide to reject your Maisa Hefker until someone else is zocha. If you yourself take it, then that's considered a chazor min a Hefker. So it never really left your reshus.
So you can have
that's
both.
going to Rabbi Yochanan.
Be both. It never left your reshus, but it still was Hefker. Meaning for P'tur Meiser.
No, it sounds like Rebby.
You want to say a new chiddush in Mas?
Well, I think Rashi is pshat, and what's the P'tur Meiser for Hefker? Because at a certain point in time, right, the reason we give True and Meiser is Ke'en lo chelik min achala. For those 6 hours before he changed his mind, the Levi had the Levi come and he had just as much rights as anyone else did. That could be enough for the P'tur Meiser, meaning even within Rabbi Yossi.
So you don't need a chal shem Hefker.
No, Rabbi Yossi doesn't say there's no such thing as Hefker. He's saying that while it's Hefker in that time period before the new BIyun acquire it, there's never a time there's no BIyun. But there's still going to be a time period where there is a BIyun, and it's Hefker. Hefker is rishus for anyone else to come and take it. Rabbi Yossi doesn't say that someone isn't allowed to come and take it. It's Hefker, they can come and take it.
Right. But the question is, you're saying that even if it didn't leave your rishus, it still might be Hefker.
It is, I mean, according to Rabbi Yossi, that's what Hefker is.
Are you kind of saying the same thing? Because you're giving someone the ability to take it. So it's still in your shoes, but you're giving someone the ability to take it. That's what we were saying before.
Right.
If you own something, according to Rebby Yossi, and it would like a mafker, according to Rebby Yossi, and then it hurt someone else, right?
Also, that was my next question about Mazikin.
So yeah, that I'm according to Rebby Yossi, I don't know I'm storing a dangerous chemical and it blew up.
Not even dangerous chemical, like
right, because it hurt someone. the thing, okay. So did Rebbe Yossi say I'm still like okay, assuming that there was like Shmirat Olav and everything.
Right, because the
And-
Gemara is operating with the premise, according to Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation, that Rabbi Yossi holds that Hefker still belongs to you. It never
That's
it never
right,
left
that's
your
all.
bilos
No, but even Rabbanan
until someone else is zochen.
Yeah,
So
that's
you're
what-
giving reshus to
that's what
someone
I'm
else to be zocha, but until that point takes place, it never left your reshus. And if it never left your reshus, it's not really Hefker. The Hefker is chal, so to speak, simultaneously with the moment that someone else is zochen.
Oh,
But in the
by
meantime,
Rebbe
it's still
Yossi.
your reshus. In Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi
According to
Yochanan.
Rebbe Yossi.
But
Right.
I think that the Gemara says Shnei Dvarim Einam B'Reshus Shalad, meaning even if it's not in your Reshus, the Gemara says you're still chayav for Nezikin. Right? That's Shnei Dvarim Einam
Like
B'Reshus
Barbara
Shalad.
Sarab.
No, you can't say according to Rabban I make something hefker and then it can damage the world and I'm not chayav. Of course I'm chayav even if
According
I'm
to the
not.
Chachamim.
Yeah, I mean even you don't need to hold like Rabbi Yossi to say that you're going to be chayav in Nezikin.
I'm after a car, and it's not Matsui.
Is this door open, by the way?
It can't open.
How are you?
The second question I had is that we're talking about Meiser. Is there a reason to describe the Chiv Meiser instead of Chiv Trumos, or they just go together? In other words, like, is there a reason that we picked?
Truma Meiser.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a package deal. Okay, Rabosa, you have this in your phone, and this is called Hefker Kematana, and it's Otzer Hayunim number Mem Zayin. And it's on page, if you look at the top right, page Samach Vav. And in his first paragraph, he tells you that this sugya that we're learning really extends over 3 block Gemara, from Mem Gimel all the way to Mem He. And the question is, at what point is there a chalos hefker? Is hefker immediate after he was mafkir, he declared it hefker? Or is hefker something that'll be chal later on, at a later moment, and according to Rabbi Yossi, at the moment that someone else is zoche? Now, he has a section here called Makar HaHalacha, which you'll see on the bottom right of this page, and it goes all the way over to Samach Zayin at the end of the right column. And he starts in this section of Makar HaHalacha by summarizing in the paragraph that starts with Mishnah Nechleku what we saw in the Gemara. And then he writes, "V'nechleku ha'amoraim b'bir shitas Rabbi Yossi." So he starts with Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, who says that even if the Madir places the muzzle on a boulder and he declares it hefker, the Mudar is not allowed to pick it up and enjoy the benefit of that object. Says Rabbi Yochanan, why? Taimo mishum desover ein ha-hefker yotze meshuso ad sheyovo l'shus zocha. So it remains in your reshus until someone else picks it up. Vagederhu, where do we find in general that you could be makna something, but the kinyan is only chal when someone else is kona? So you need makna and kona. That's matana. She'ein chal hafkos habailus shel hamafkir el mikoch shenichnas u'shus hazocha. Just like in matana, the object doesn't leave the reshus of the bailim until the zocha, the makabel matana, makes a kinyan on it. So too, hefker cannot be chal and remove your bailus, according to Rabbi Yossi, until someone else is zochin it. So that's the equation between hefker and matana. Kodem lechein, before someone else makes a kinyan, lo poka koch habailus shel hamafkir. It doesn't leave the ownership of the mafkir. Chachamim, on the other hand, hold that hefker is nigmar miyad. Yotzim reshuso poka baluso tekef mishefkiro. Once he does the ma'aser hefker, it immediately leaves his reshus, and anyone could be zochin it from hefker. Ubiru Rishonim shel Rabbi Yochanan Yochanan mafkir lachzer bo ad she'yagil lidei hazocha. Just like in the case of matana, until someone is makabel the matana and he makes a kinyan, the Baal hamatana could be choser, but so too, by analogy, in the case of Hefker or Rabbi Yochanan, if a person decides after he was mafkirid that he doesn't want it to be Hefker and no one else was zocha in it, then he could completely reverse and void his Hefker. And no one else subsequently could be zocha. Ubipshuto, taimo, mishum, the nechshav shachalosa Hefker, lo nigmar adayin, ad sheyavel lidei hazocha bo. So at this point in time, again, we'll see later on that he offers another interpretation, but now he's saying that it's not really Hefker. The Hefker is not nigmar. It's only in a fledgling state, in a potential state. But it only becomes Hefker when the Zocha acquires ownership on that object. Umemela, and therefore, since it's not really Hefker yet, Mo'ila chazara kodem hachalos, he can be choser bo. Now, in the case of Madir and Mudar, the fact that the Madir allows the Mudar to pick up this mazon and acquire it from the seller, that in a sense is a mice of Mahana. Why is the Madir being Mahana the Mudar? Because he is not being choser, but the fact that he decides to allow the Mudar to be Zocha without exercising his rights to be choser bo, that itself is a Hana. And the Yerushalmi seems to assume, like Rabbi Yochanan, Tani, Rabbi Meir Omer Kevin Shalom Mafkir Yotza Hadovim Shuso, Rabbi Yossi Omer Ein Hefker Yotze Mitachas Yidei Bailim, Ela B'Domeh. Now we have to see what the word Domeh means, but there's another girsa that you'll see here in number Gimel on the bottom, B'Zechia. Zechia means when someone else is Zocha. So the language of the Yerushalmi is quite clear that the Hefker is not Chal according to Rabbi Yossi until someone is Zocha. Hefker Sadeu, if he was Mafker is Sada, is Tani Chozerbo. According to one opinion, which would reflect the Shita of Yossi, he could be Chozerbo. For is Tani Eno Chozerbo. And that Lechor would be the Shita of the Chachamim, because we said according to Chachamim, immediately following the Maisa Hefker, it's completely Hefker. It's no longer in his Rishus. He can't be Chozerbo. It's already Hefker. It's not his. Okay. Now, I just want to fast forward for a moment to Shitas Reish Lakish, which you'll see on the next page, Samach Zayin, the last paragraph. Hatam sheyochol lachzer bo. Even Reish Lakish agrees that according to Rav Yossi, he could be choser bo, but not because of a doraisa halacha, but rather because of Gzeres Chachamim mishum harama. What is harama? Harama means when a person on the outside, he camouflages as if he's being mafkir, when really on the inside, in terms of what he really wants, he has no interest whatsoever in being mafkir. He's only doing it in order to circumvent the laws of Neder and the Isser of Mudar Anah. Kederech shu b'matnas beis chorin. So the Gemara tells us a whole story about matnas beis chorin, and the Gemara says that he wasn't really serious about his hefker, and he only did it for the sake of harama in order to try to circumvent the law of Isser Neder. So therefore, Gazru, the Chacham made a gzeira, and they said, you know what? We're going to allow you to be choser bo. And then we'll see what's going to happen. Are you going to wait patiently on the sidelines, passively, and allow someone to be zocha bo? And then at that point, that person is zocha bo, and we know that you were serious and you had a full gemiras das to be mafkir your bailus. O sheyizke bo hamafkir atzmo. According to Reish Lakish, the very moment that the mafkir himself is zocha bo, is donim miyad donim also kimisha lo chal me'olam. What does lo chal me'olam mean? The hefker is not chal. So what he's basically doing is Yochel Lachserbo. Lachserbo means that there was never a Chalos Hefker. And that's why the Gemara assumes that there would be no P'tur of Trumas or Maisrus in that case. Aval Kshe'ein Chashash Haroma, it could very well be that theoretically, in abstract terms, Rabbi Yossi would also agree that Hefker is Chal immediately, like the Chachamim, in a situation where there's no Chash Haram. Okay. Now, what I wanted to show you here is Tam HaHalacha. In this paragraph called Tam HaHalacha, this section, he wants to analyze this concept of Rabbi Yossi. Why is Rabbi Yossi so inhibited, so hesitant to accept the Chachamim that a person could be mafkir something and immediately becomes hefker? After all, there are many, many precedents in the Torah for hafkas bailus. The concept of hafkas bailus is rooted in many, many different halachas. And you'll see a paragraph called Umatzinu. You have this? Just if you could let me know, I just want to know if you have.
Yep.
You have it, Umatzinu? That's on the bottom right of page Samat Zayin. Did it come through?
Yep.
Yeah? You have it, Adam? You look a little perplexed. I don't know. What? Well, maybe you don't have a phone. I don't know.
I have a photo of reading the log nicely.
Okay, good. So look at the number of cases where there is hefker. Okay, take a look. Number one, Peros Shvius. On the 7th year, the Peros are hefker. Unless you rely on Het Mechira, which I'm not going to comment on. Because in Efrat, I have to close my mouth. Number two, then you have what's called Yev.
I don't think you can just say that half a sentence.
All right. Let's just leave it at this. We have to travel to Beitar to buy our fruits and vegetables. Eventually that'll change, but it'll take a while. Anyway, so what's
the story that Rav Shechter said, like in the last year or two, that somebody told him that the Rav Soloveitchik supported the Heter Mekira. And so Rav Shechter said, well, what do you mean? Why do you say that he said that? Because it doesn't work for anything in Brisk, right? And the man said, my father made Aliyah in 1969. And he asked Rav Soloveitchik, and he said, I know that some Rabbanim say to eat that Mechira and some say don't. So what should I do? And he said, so Rav Soloveitchik asked them, are you careful every year to sell your chametz, for Pesach? And the man said, yes, I go every year every Pesach, and I have the rabbi sell my chametz.
So you can sell the land.
Said, yes, you should eat that Mechira.
So now we have Haveda and Yeush. Now this is very interesting. If you own an object and you lost the object and you gave up on finding it and you said, you were Messiah, that's mafkir your bailus. That's interesting. You didn't do a Maisa Hefker, you didn't do a Maisa Hakna, you didn't declare that it's not mine and you aren't mafkir it, and yet it becomes Hefker. So we see that in the Torah there is such a thing as Hafkas bailus. Third case, Avuda b'mena mikol adam. Right, this is what we learned when we were in 4th grade. Of course, I didn't understand it in 4th grade. I still don't understand. But anyway,
he's making so many assumptions and so many different lumps over here, calling all these things hefker.
Well, let's leave out the word hefker.
Why is he saying Yeosh?
He's talking about Hafkas bailus.
Okay,
right? He wants to say that the Torah itself has, in many different areas, the concept of Hafkas bailus without a kinyan. You didn't make a kinyan, you were Messiah. You said, okay, I'm not going to find it. Where's the kinyan here? And yet it's no longer yours. It's ownerless.
All of these examples are just examples where someone else has refused to take something. Who said that works through Hafkat? Meaning,
no, but if someone else could take it, it means that it's not yours.
Why?
If it's yours, then
according to Rebby Yossi, that's exactly what Hefker is.
Well, wait a second. You're a step ahead of me. What we're trying to do now, let me just explain the methodology. We want to show that the concept of terminating bailus, even without a kinyan, is well precedented in many different areas of halacha. I can give you many examples where the Torah would say, it's no longer yours, anyone could take it away from you, and you didn't do anything actively. Now the question is, can we jump one step beyond that and say that actively you could be mafkir something. That's what we're going to get to in a minute. But again, just within this limited scope and perspective, we see that many occasions the Torah says it's no longer yours. And if somebody takes it, he's not violating these exela. And you didn't even actively do a Maisa Kinyan. Yehush is not a Maisa Kinyan.
So if I'm a Yayish, and then by some fluke I end up finding it, I'm the first one I find that I pick it up. Would we say, let's say these are fruits and vegetables? Right. Is there a Torah Meiser here? Was it Hefker? I would assume not. I mean, Rabbi Yossi could write just as easily in all of these cases say just because someone else took, meaning the same way as Hefker, it's yours until the other person picks it up. In all these cases, you can make the same argument. I'm just saying it seems like he's making a lot of assumptions and setting up all these different cases. But fine, I'll leave that.
All right. Torah. Let's say, for example, chametz b'Pesach, it's not yours. Nasu Hefker. Okay, not everybody would agree that it's Hefker, but everyone would agree that you're allowed to take it, and your bilus is no longer viable. Right? What happens is you leave a corner of your field,
right,
and it's Hefker laniyim. Now he's learning that it's not just a Hafkaz Bailus, but it's really Hefker. Shepokarish Bailim, Mimamono, Vieno Shalo. So at this point, having established that there are many precedents halacha where the Torah says it's not yours and anyone can come and take it, let's put the machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and Chachamim into this perspective and see how we can understand this. He says, "Achen yesh levar ma'u makar hadin shemaisa hefker midas ha'adam poel chalos."
Just finishing off Samach Zayin, the right side.
Samach Zayin, the end of the right side. He says, for example, in all these other cases that we have, there's a reason why your bilus is mufka. It's an objective reality. It's an aveda, and there was Yeush. It's Shvius, the 7th year. It's Matnas Aniyim. It's Isuri Hana. But hello, Ein Kan Sibalaf. But in the case of Hefker, there's no reality here that would remove your bilus. In all the other cases, whether you like it or not, the Torah says that your bilus is removed. Do we have a precedent that you yourself, with no apparent reason, can remove your own bilus? And on a deeper level, I think what he's saying is that something is yours, it's always yours for infinity until you make akna and you're maknid by taking it out of your rishus and bringing it into someone else's rishus. So all these precedents really have no status as precedents. You can't justify them as precedents because in all these cases, the Torah says in such a reality, your bilus is paka. But can you come along, therefore, and for no apparent reason, it's not an Aveda, and it's not Matnas Aniyim, and it's not Shvius, and you want to remove your bilus without being maknid to someone else? Where's the source for that? And he quotes here a Yerushalmi in Pei, a very famous Yerushalmi. This I went with Rabbi Yossi, this Yerushalmi. And the Yerushalmi says that we derive Hefker from Shvius. Why? Because there's an extra word in the pasuk. It says unitashta. So the Yerushalmi darshans that what is this netisha? It's in addition to Shvius. Shvius is an netisha against your will. The Torah, that's called Afkata de Malka. The Torah says we mafkia your bilus in Shvius. However, the Torah also adds unitashta. Unitashta is an active verb that tells you that you could be mafkir something. Umikoach drashazu lamdu shetzarach shamaisa hefker bedoma l'shvius shehei laniim ula shirim. Right, and on shvius it's hefker lakol. So this enters into a famous machlokes beisil beit Shammai where you can be mafkir only for certain group, a certain specific part of the population. Bachsam sofer bir shechachamim savru. This is against Rabbi Yossi. Shehefker chal miyad. Just like shvius is immediately chal, so too you have the koach of unitashta to be mafkir something, be mafkir your bailus, and immediately it's out of your possession, and then it's kol hakodim zocha. You can't nudge out. You can't push out anyone else, and you can't reverse or rescind your hefker because it's already mufka. Your bailus is mufka, just like in the case of shvius. For Rabbi Yossi Cholek says the Cham Sofer, Shalola made them shvius. It's not valid to set up an analogy from shvius. Again, what he does with the extraordinary tashta, we have to know. But putting that on the side, just conceptually, shvius is something which the Torah imposes upon you and actively removes your bailus on something. But that you can create hafkas bailus on your own without a kinyan, says Rabbi Yossi, that's not so, because it's yours and it remains yours until you take it out of your rishus by giving it to someone else. Can there be hefker? Well, says Rabbi Yossi, you can't derive anything from shvius, because shvius again is imposed by the Torah as afkas bailus, whether you like it or not. Now you, from your own initiative, make a decision that you want to be mafkir your bailus. I declare that my bailus is completely null and void, it's terminated. How do you terminate your bailus? It's always yours. It remains yours until you're maknid, and you aren't maknid. How could the chachamim establish an analogy between shvius and hefker when there's an obvious distinction? The Torah is mafkia your bailus and shvius. You want to now be mafkia your bailus and remove your ownership. How can you prove anything from shvius? The Torah took it out of your rishus. Now you want to take it out of your shus? It's yours. Be maknid to somebody else. And he says, "Bepashtus yesh lomar shelo chilku bazeh." The Chacham say the following: we see that there's something called, the Torah recognizes a chalos afkas bailus. Who picked it up? In shvius, who picked it up? Nobody. We're waiting for the aniyim or whoever comes to pick it up. And yet, your bailus is completely gone. So there is such a thing as a chalos hafkas bailus. I admit, I grant you, it was the Torah that was mafkir your bailus. But at the end of the day, this gives us a precedent, a peg to hang our hat on, that there is such a thing as hafkas bailus, even though no one else was zoch in it. You can terminate your bailus, and therefore you could be mafkir. What difference does it make whether the Torah did it or you, the bailam, did it? If the Torah does it, then you can do it. That's the shittas chacham.
Does anybody? It sounds like we're considering that. Okay, in the 6th year, I owned it, and then it's called shmita, and now I don't own it anymore. Is there a way of looking at it where my bailus never included shnat shmita in the first place? That I couldn't. It's not possible to own it, not subject to.
You know what you're reminding me of? There's a discussion at the beginning of Masechet Ksubis about what's called Geulas Hasodeh Toch Yud Beis Chodesh, or Yovel. So when I sold you my karka, did I sell it to you forever? And then Yovel comes and undoes the kinyan, or the kinyan lechatchila from the get-go was never up included to, but not beyond Yovel, or maybe in terms, I don't know exactly how it works in Shemitah, but there are similar things. Now, I would like to suggest something here, and I say it with a little bit of trepidation, but maybe the machlokas here between Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim is not about the gap between Shvius and Hefker, but maybe it's a machlokas about what exactly Hefker is. Meaning, the Chachamim learned from Shvius that there's something called Hefker. And Hefker is no less of a bailus than private ownership. And with Shvius, we have something called a Rishus of Hefker. There's an entity called Hefker. So Hefker is not just a siluk of the Isuk Zela, allowing anyone to be zoch in it, but Hefker is a positive bailus. Like, for example, again, it's not a good analogy. Don't take me literally here, but you have something called Hegdish. I could be Magdish something, and it belongs to Hegdish. Obviously, Hegdish is a different kind of bailus. Well, let's say, for example, a Sefer Torah. Sefer Torah is considered a bailus. The bailus of the city, of the Bnei Ya'ir, right? The whole sugi at the end of Bava Basra, that if, let's say, you want to testify about someone who stole the Sefer Torah, so you have to remove your ownership from the Sefer Torah. So the Sefer Torah is owned by the entire city. So we see that there's something called ownership that goes beyond private ownership. Shutfis is private ownership, but we are both like one entity owning the object. But there's something where, in a sense, no one owns the object. Or maybe it's not that no one owns the object, but everyone owns the object. And that's called Hefker.
Similar chiluk is by Shoshel Hefker, right? The question is that Shoshel Hefker, in theory, Mr. Hefker owes you money, but Lamaisa, he can't give it to you. Or is it that, no, there's no bailus. So
there's no bailus at all. That's
Right.
what I'm wondering. Maybe the Chachamim saw in Shvius a real breakthrough. And they said, what are you telling me? You can't be mafkir something. Why? Because you didn't give a hakna. You didn't implement a hakna. Maybe the Chacham hold that Hefker is a hakna. When I'm mafkir something, I'm being makdir something to Hefker. Hefker is not the absence of ownership, but it's an existing entity of ownership. There's something called Hefker. For example, the famous Sugi in Bab Mitzia of Zachin Li'olam Shelo B'fanov, except for B'makom Shechav L'Acherim. So the Gemara says that if I want to pick up Hefker on your behalf through Zachin Li'olam Shelo B'fanov, it doesn't work. It's not operative. Why? Because it's Chav L'Acherim. Chav L'Acherim. What kind of Chav L'Acherim? It's Hefker. Nobody owns it. Apparently, the Gemara is assuming that everyone has something in that Hefker. So if you go ahead and exclude other people, that's called Chav L'Acherim. You want to be Zocher for yourself, that's one thing, but you want to be Zocher for someone else. And then the Gemara goes through Migu to Zocher Nafshi, Zocher Nafshi, and so forth and so on. But without the Migu, the Gemara has a serious problem that I can't be Zocher and Hefker on your behalf because it's the exclusion of somebody else. Well, if that other person doesn't have any schus, why is that called Chav L'Acherim? So he must have some schuyos, some monetary rights in the Hefker. So Hefker is not the absence of monetary rights. It's not like, we think of a boulder, what's it called, that fell down from heaven, and landed on earth. But rather, Hefker means it enters into the Rishus of Hefker. And if that be the case, what the Chacham is saying is that what we're going to derive from Shvius is that there's something called Hefker. And once there's something called Hefker, you could be makna your object to Hefker. Rabbi Yossi thinks, no, Shvius is not in any way indicative of an entity called Hefker, which belongs to Hefker, like Hegdish. But rather, Shvius just tells you that any ani, or any usher for that matter, could come into your field and take away your produce. But it doesn't prove anything about Hefker. And therefore, if Hefker is not an entity, then you need Hakna. Because as we said before, Rabbi Yossi assumes that until you take it out of your Rishus, it still remains yours. It's in your Rishus. Where was the Hakna? But if we say that Hefker is an entity, then you could be makna something to Hefker. And there's such a thing as a phantom Hefker who's Zocher, and creates a bailus called Hefker. Who is the bailum on Hefker? Everyone is a bailum on Hefker. It's not the absence of bailus, but it's the existence of a positive bailus, and everyone has a schus in Hefker. So you are maknid to Hefker. Now, the reason why he doesn't even have such a possibility is, I think, because he's looking for a Maisa Kinyan. Now, there's something called Mili, Diburim. You can make a declaration. I can stand here from now until doomsday and say that this table is yours. And it's not Chal. We need a Maisa Kinyan. So even if I were to grant you that there's such a thing called Hefker as an entity, as a common bailus, but where's the Maisa Kinyan? What did I do? Did I give it over to you? Who's the you over here? Who made the Kinyan? Where was the transaction? All I did was I declared that it's Hefker. Achei nechleku achronim l'shitas Reb Yossi shalo yesh lo dun. This is what you were talking about before. Ma'u ha'hefker Reb Yossi ha'im eino klum. Right, it didn't go into any other person's rishus. No one was zoching it. Therefore, there's nothing. Don't call it hefker. Right, so the best you can say about hefker is that somebody else could come and be zoching. Oh, and this is more the chidush here. Sheyesh din hefker lematzav zeh. Even Rabbi Yossi holds there is such a middle category, like it's a shlav of Hefker, and it is Hefker. Right? He doesn't really clarify it.
I think it's a point, according to the Hefker of Shvis is an instantaneous one-time transfer into Rishus of Hefker. While according to Rabbi Yossi, we have it's a whole in-between time period.
Rebby doesn't clarify what that in-between is. That's why I wanted to learn with you page Samach Tes, which is, I think, the last page that you have. Am I correct?
I think so. We did 4.
He calls it here. He calls it a Nesinas Rishus L'Schia. That's
correct. So then it's not really Hefker. It's just I'm just allowing you to be Zocher.
That's the definition of Hefker. But Hefker doesn't mean
I think that's the first side of this Chakira. Look up to before the word O, right? He says that what is Hefker? He says Eino Klum. Do you see that language? Eino Klum on the second line. Eino Klum, meaning it's not really Hefker. All it is this Nesinas Rishus.
He's almost suggesting that according to Rabbi Yossi, there's no such thing as Hefker. There's no time period of Hefker.
Right.
That's the first thing. The second one is there is Hefker.
Oh, so now I'd like to clarify what exactly is that extra step in the second side of his Chakira that it's Hefker. You know, in the first side he said, I gave you Rishus to be Zocher, but it's still mine. Now he's saying, no, it's Hefker, according to Rabbi Yossi. Well, what does he mean here? What is that Hefker? He leaves it like up in the air. So that's why I thought that maybe it would be clarified if we take a look at the Shari Yosha of Reb Shimon Shkar. He says, the first side in the Chakira, I don't like. Shal Divrayim, according to those Achronim, maybe even Rishonim, Nimtza Shal Rabbi Yossi lo chal klum behefker. So that's the first side. It's just the Sinas Rishus that allows you to be Zocher, but it's not Hefker. Ella, yeah. So that's the first one. Lefizet Tamur. Why does Reb Shimon Shkop have some sort of like allergic reaction to that definition? And then we have to see the other side. Even according to Rabbi Yossi, Shehefker Kamatana, Titochen Zechia Shal Bailim B'Tor Zochim in a Hefker. Right? The Gemara goes back and forth. Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish. If a person wakes up the next morning after he was mafkir the night before and he harvests his crop, is that considered Zochem and a Hefker? Is he Potter min Hamasros? And Reish Lakish says that he should be Chayiv in Maser, and Rebby Yochanan says he's Potter min Hamasr. But Nafgemina Sheptur mi Masros l'Shitas Haran. Follow ein kan efshoros lizkos matana mirshus atzmo shadayim rishuso al hamomon at sheyizke boacher. How can you tell me that this is Hefker if you're arguing that all he did was he gave rishus to someone else to be zocher, but he took it for himself?
I mean, there's a difference in being chozerbo and being konet, again, from Hefker, the Bible.
But he's saying that if there's no such thing as Hefker according to Rabbi Yossi, and it really never left your rishus,
There would be
then
no difference. There has to be a difference between those two.
Correct. That's what Shimon's arguing. So you can't say that Rabbi Yossi denies the whole concept of Hefker. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the halacha is that if he himself, the Bailam is Zocha, he's Potem in a Maser. So there must be a positive state of Hefker in between. It's not just that he says, makes declaration, anyone who takes it, Tovel of Bracha, and there's no Gzela here. It's got to be a positive Hefker.
That's Rebby Yochanan on Rebby Yossi, right?
Correct. That's Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yossi, and now it's Rabbi Shimon Shkop in Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yossi, that the reason why you put him in a mass is because you yourself, the Bailam, are being Zochem in a Hefker. It's not a Chazara in which nothing happened. You gave Rishus and nobody took you up on the offer. No, it's Hefker. If it's not Hefker, then how could it be put him in a mass? That's Rabbi Shimon Shkop. Ulefichach in the next paragraph, right? That's at the end of the paragraph. He says, "Behechrik shechalkan rega echad shel hefker." So when someone else is being zoche, he's being zochem in a hefker. But again, then we're going to have a problem with Nedarim. We're in a real bind over here because from Nedarim we get the impression that nothing happened until somebody else was zoche. In this case, the mudar, it never left the rishus of the violent. So there is no entity called hefker. Otherwise, if it was Hefker, then Rabbi Yossi would agree to the Rabbanon that what? That this is a great method of circumventing the Isur Neder. L'ficha cholek Rav Shimon Shkop al Darkom. This is the Koach HaTorah of Rav Shimon Shkop. Ubir shachelek harishon shenoktu achronim shu askama that he just agreed that anyone can take it. So far he's just regurgitating what we know, and he's just changing the language, right? He hasn't really given anything of substance. He's just saying it's already chal, there's already some state of hefker. It's not just that anyone could come and take it. But he says chalos hefker mischalik l'shnei chalokim. Okay, now we're getting into substance. Chelek harishon shenikbas haskama shachefetz mutal chal adam b'zechir af shalom idaita. So I think the key word here is nikba'a. Do you see the word nikbas? I think in my language it would be chalos. Like there's a certain chalos here. It's not just that he's allowing anyone to come in and take it, but there's a kvius. There's some sort of chalos. Af shalom idaita. The kaviyachol on the top left here, nisyached hamamon. Okay, so I wanted to say Nisyach Hamam means it enters into some sort of entity called Hefker. Lef Shorish Kol Adam Yizkaba. It's kind of like a permanent das makna. Again, it's not permanent because it could be chozerbo, but in the meantime, it's a full-fledged das makna, and the das makna generates a stage of Hefker, stage number 1 of Hefker. V'ein tzarich das bailam lahaskim l'kinyono. My worst enemy comes along to be zoche after I was mafkir. That's fine. If he gets there first, before I was chozerbo, he could be konit. Why? Because there's some sort of chalushem askama, which I would call a das makna. And the das makna is like written in stone. It's engraved in stone. The chelik sheni, what's the ultimate kinyan? That's when there's a das kona. In addition to das makna, there's a das kona. But das makna itself is a kind of hefker, which I thought means that he's being mafkir to hefker. Ke'ein shmita shechal bo afkata de malka. Okay, afkata de malka is at the end of the train ride, at the final station. It's completely out of your rishus. So you can't be choser. In a kinyan, not shvius, we have a first stage that is kovea a das mak. And if somebody comes along and takes it, he could be zocha through the das mak with the das kona. And you can't do anything to stop it. At stage number 2, then it enters into the rishus of the kona when there's a das kona, and your pilus is puck. So what does Reb Shimon want to gain from this? He wants to explain 2 different dinim according to Reb Yossi. Din number 1 is madir and nodir. And since at stage number 1, even though through his hefker he was kovea the das makna, but nevertheless, he still could be choser bo. And therefore, if the muder hana is zoch in it, he gains hana from the madir who could have exercised his right to be choser and he was not. But now he wants to gain something else. Why would there be a p'tur hefker? A p'tur maseh? And the answer is because there was already a chalos kvius of das makna. And the das makna gives it over to hefker. And in that sense, there's a p'tur maseh. The chidesh Reb Shimon.
What would be the makor for that? Because you only have, as if the makor is from like Shemitah, things of that sort, you only have a makor for Shlav Bet.
Right.
Where's your makor for Shlav Aleph?
Correct. And that's going to have to be misvara. The svara is that if the Torah says there's something called afkos bailus, then I, midaiti, can decide to be mafkia my bailus. And I do it in 2 stages. At stage number 1, I'm kovea my das makna. At stage number 2, there's a das kona. Let's just see if we can fit in one more paragraph. The Chidei Shama Gon Rab Shimon Shka. Excuse me. My wife always complains that I yell and scream. I shouldn't do it because it kills my voice. He says, "Shesiachadus zu shenikba b'chefetz shemutul chol adam hu shinui b'dinei ha'ikuv she'ein tzorich das l'zchiyas acherim." Well, what was chal through this kvius? That you no longer need a das makna because you already have a das makna. And that das makna for the time being is engraved in stone. And therefore somebody else could be zocher, shalom idaito, balkorcha. V'gam l'Rabbi Yossi ukach. Even Rabbi Yossi agrees that there is that first stage of hefker, which the das makna is chal in such a way that someone now, by giving his das kona, could cut off the makna, even against the will of the makna. V'zel chalos. Oh, now he used the word chalos. Before he was using the word nikba. Heter zechia k'fi she'yisbar kach la'alon begidra yeyush. So he says that yeyush is also like Rabbi Yossi's hefker, and in both cases, there's no complete hafkos bailus, but what we have is a das makna that's set in stone, and that's called the chalos hefker, and that's enough to pater you from mas, but it's not enough to circumvent the din of muder hana. But the big question is, where's the Maisa Kinyan? You see, das makna without a Maisa Kinyan is a very strange entity. the natural intuition of a person rejects the idea of a das makna that's kovea when there's no Maisa Kinyan. And that's why I just want to finish up here. He writes, V'agon Rav Shimon Shchal Cholek Gam al Divrei Achronim Shenaktu She'ein Maisa Kinyan Behefker. See, all the Achronim are bothered. How can you be kovea a das makna without a Maisa Kinyan? He made a verbal declaration. It must be that according to Rav Yossi, there's no such entity as Hefker. Says Rav Shimon Shchal, no, there is a Maisa Kinyan. Where's the Maisa Kinyan? And he says, Adam poel b'dibur. This is Reb Shimon. He says that lo chaser ma'aseh kinyan behefker lefi sha'af sheyesh rak dibur mikom makom niya mikoach hadibur. Okay, the next word I don't understand. Hisnagus b'chefes. I don't know. That's already Reb Shimonic. That's already his language. But he says, Zera Maisa Kinyan Shalom. And I think that what Rabbi Yossi is saying here, according to Rav Shimon, is what we call Hein Hein Advarma Nikdim Ba'mira. Are you familiar with that phrase?
It makes sense.
Like, for example, you could be magdish something through a mirror and it leaves your bailus. Or, for example, if the chassan and the kala make an agreement, the parents come and they say, well, I'll give this and I'll give this. There are cases where a mirror itself operates as a Maisa Kinyan. So if you would ask me, where is the source from which this machlokas between the Achronim and Rav Shimon evolves? Why do the Achronim say, according to Rav Yossi, there is no such thing as a middle stage of Hefker? Whereas Rav Shimon says there is a Chalos Hefker. It's basically, it can be boiled down to the question is whether Dibur could be a Maisa Kinyan. All the Achronim understood that Dibur is not a Maisa Kinyan. So how can you tell me that you effectuated some sort of das makna in which somebody else could be zochen it against your will without a Maisa Kinyan? It's impossible. And Rav Shimon, from his part, understands that the Dibur itself could function as a Maisa Kinyan. Okay, then we'll stop here. There's so much here. I mean,
it shouldn't be so difficult to come with a solution to that because Shitas Chacham is that it goes into Rishus.
Have a great day. And
Shitas Chacham is that it goes into Rishus. No one's bothered about where's the Maisa Kinyan. I mean, we're almost like creating a new issue for Rebby Yossi when trying to basically minimize the gap between Rebby Yossi and Rebbe. No one's bothered about it. We don't need a Maisa Kinyan. That makes it interesting. You don't need Maisa Kinyan. Why is that so? Why is that so difficult? I mean, why is it only difficult with the
Chachamim have a shita of shmita? There is such a thing that I could set it up that the Torah is mafkia the Bible. Okay then.
How long have you been done?
Yes.
Yeah.